What is the ultimate symbol of a billionaire's power? For Damien Blackwood, it was the key to his penthouse office, a sleek obsidian card that unlocked a kingdom in the clouds. He gave that key to his mistress, a whispered promise of a shared future, a world of luxury at her fingertips. He thought he was giving her a piece of his empire. He never imagined that the key he so carelessly gave away was not his to give. He was merely a tenant, a guest in a gilded cage, and the woman he was betraying, his pregnant wife Isabella, was not just the owner of his heart, but the silent, undisputed owner of the entire building. This is the story of how one little key unlocked a catastrophic downfall. The New York City skyline was Damien Blackwood's personal art collection. From the 80th floor penthouse office of Blackwood Innovations, the city spread out below him like a circuit board of glittering diamonds. At 38, he was the charismatic self-made titan of the fintech world, a man whose ambition was as tall as the skyscraper his name seemed to command. He had it all, a company valued at 10 figures a face that graced the cover of Forbes, and a wife whose elegance and grace were the envy of their social circle. His wife, Isabella Sterling, was different. Where Damien was a supernova of charisma and aggressive expansion, Isabella was the quiet gravity that held his universe together. She was old money, the sole heiress to the Sterling Properties empire, a dynasty that had been shaping the city's skyline since the Gilded Age. She was beautiful, intelligent, and possessed a stillness that many mistook for fragility. They had been married for 5 years, a union that the society pages called the perfect merger of new power and old prestige. Lately, that stillness in Isabella had deepened. 6 months pregnant with their first child, a son she had withdrawn from the endless galas and charity balls. Her world had shrunk to the serene luxury of their Fifth Avenue apartment, a world of prenatal yoga nursery planning and quiet anticipation. Damien found her new domesticity boring. He loved her, of course, in the way a king loves his queen. She was essential to his image, the mother of his heir. But the thrill, the chase, the conquest that fueled his every business deal was absent from his marriage. He found that thrill elsewhere. Her name was Chloe Vance. She was 25, an ambitious marketing associate at his company, with wide, hungry eyes, and a laugh that made Damien feel like he was 28 again, not a man on the verge of fatherhood. She wasn't as polished as Isabella, but she was electric. She looked at him not as a husband or a partner, but as a god. Their affair started as most do late nights at the office, a shared car ride in the rain, a lingering touch over a business proposal. Soon it escalated to clandestine dinners at obscure restaurants and stolen weekends at boutique hotels under the name Mr. Smith. To Damien, it was a necessary indulgence, a pressure valve for the immense stress of his life. He was providing for Isabella, building a legacy for their son. This was for him. He compartmentalized his life with the same ruthless efficiency he applied to his corporate acquisitions. One Thursday evening, as a lavender dusk settled over Manhattan, Damien and Isabella were having a quiet dinner at home. Isabella, radiant in a simple silk maternity gown, was talking about names. "What do you think of Nathaniel?" she asked, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "Nathaniel Sterling Blackwood. It sounds strong, doesn't it?" "It's fine, Bella, fine," Damien replied, scrolling through market reports on his phone. His mind wasn't on names. It was on the silk dress Chloe had worn the night before and the way she'd whispered his name. Isabella's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "You haven't heard a word I've said, have you?" "Of course I have. Nathaniel. Great name. Classic." He put the phone down, forcing a smile. "Just a crisis with the Tokyo launch." You know how it is. He reached across the table and took her hand. I'm sorry, my love. My mind is just cluttered. How are you feeling? How is our little champion doing in there? Her expression softened instantly. He's a kicker, especially at night. The doctor says he's strong. He's a Blackwood, Damien said with a proud grin. Of course he's strong. He played the part of the doting husband for the rest of the evening, rubbing her feet, listening to her talk about different shades of blue for the nursery walls. But as soon as she was asleep, her gentle breathing a soft rhythm in the quiet of their vast apartment, he slipped out onto the balcony. The city lights called to him. He pulled out his phone and sent a text. To Chloe, subject tomorrow. Message my office. 6 p.m. I have something for you. He looked back through the glass at his sleeping, pregnant wife. A pang of something, not quite guilt, but a fleeting, uncomfortable shame pricked at him. He quickly smothered it with ego. He was Damien Blackwood. He deserved this. He deserved it all. He was the king of this city, and kings were not bound by the same rules as ordinary men. He had no idea he was merely a pretender, living in a castle that had belonged to his queen all along. Friday evening, traffic snarled below a river of red and white lights. In his office high above the chaos, Damien felt a surge of power. The space was his sanctuary, a testament to his success. Floor-to-ceiling glass, a desk carved from a single piece of Italian marble, a private bar stocked with Japanese whiskies that cost more than a car. This was the room where empires were built and rivals were crushed, and tonight he was going to share it. Chloe arrived precisely at 6. She wore a crimson dress that clung to her figure, a stark, vibrant contrast to the cool blues and greys of the corporate suite. She looked around her eyes, wide with a mixture of awe and aspiration. Damien. This place is incredible, she breathed, tracing a finger along the polished edge of his desk. It's like being on top of the world. It is, he said, pouring them both a glass of champagne. He handed one to her, his fingers brushing against hers. And you belong here. He was intoxicated by her ambition. Unlike Isabella, who had been born into this world, Chloe wanted it. She saw his success not as a given, but as a spectacular achievement, which in turn validated his own sense of self-importance. I have something for you, he said, his voice low. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black keycard. It was heavier than a standard-issue employee badge, marked only with the subtle silver logo of Blackwood Innovations. It was a master-level key to the 80th floor. He placed it in her palm. Her skin was warm. What is this? She asked, her voice a hushed whisper. It's a key, he said, smiling. To this office. To my private elevator. It means you can come and go as you please. After hours, weekends, whenever you want to see me, whenever you need a quiet place to work, or to just be. Chloe stared at the keycard, as if it were the crown jewels. In her world, it was. It wasn't just plastic and wiring, it was a symbol. It was access. It was trust. It was a sign that she was more than just a fleeting affair. She was being invited into the inner sanctum. Damien, I don't know what to say. She stammered, her eyes glistening. Don't say anything. He moved closer, his hand finding the small of her back. Just accept it. This is our place now. He was high on the drama of his own gesture. Giving her the key was a power move, a declaration of his control. He controlled his business, his marriage, his affair. He could bend reality to his will. He believed he was giving her the key to his office in his building. He paid an exorbitant lease, after all a price that reinforced his sense of ownership. He never bothered with the fine print of the lease agreement, handled years ago by his lawyers. The landlord was a faceless corporation, Sterling Properties LLC. The name should have registered a colossal clanging alarm bell in his mind, but in his arrogance he had either forgotten or never made the connection. Sterling was a common name, and besides, Isabella had never shown the slightest interest in the commercial side of her family's portfolio. She managed the charities, the arts endowments. She was the gentle public face of the Sterling legacy, not the iron-fisted landlord. Chloe threw her arms around his neck, her lips finding his in a rush of gratitude and passion. "Thank you," she whispered against his mouth. "This means everything to me." As he held her, looking out at the sprawling city, he considered his Damien felt invincible. He had his beautiful pregnant wife at home, securing his legacy, and his vibrant, adoring mistress here, stoking his ego. It was the perfect, balanced ecosystem of his own creation. He was so focused on the view from the top that he never thought to look at the foundation. He never considered who had laid the first stone, who held the deed, who owned the very ground beneath his feet. The key he had just given away did not just unlock a door. It had armed the bomb that would eventually detonate his entire world. Isabella felt the shift before she could name it. It was in the small things. The scent of a perfume that wasn't hers, clinging faintly to Damien's suit jacket. The late-night board meetings that became more frequent. The way he looked at his phone, an almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips before he quickly schooled his features back into a mask of neutrality. She was pregnant, yes, but her instincts were sharper than ever, a primal protective sense humming just beneath the surface. She tried to dismiss it as hormonal paranoia. Damien was under pressure. The Tokyo launch was a massive undertaking. She wanted to be the supportive wife, the serene Madonna, awaiting the arrival of their heir. But a thread of unease had been pulled, and she couldn't stop it from unraveling. The Sterling Tower was more than just a building to her. It was her grandfather's legacy. She had spent childhood afternoons running through its marbled lobby while her father held meetings in the floors above. She knew its bones, its secrets, and she knew its people. Arthur Kowalski was one of those people. He had been the head of security for the Sterling Tower for 30 years. He had seen Isabella grow from a pigtailed girl in a school uniform into the poised woman she was today. His loyalty was not to the tenants, not even to a high-powered billionaire like Damien Blackwood. His loyalty was to the Sterlings. One Tuesday morning, Isabella made a rare visit to the tower. She was meeting with the director of the building's childcare facility, a pet project of hers, to discuss expanding the services for all the employees who worked there. As she was leaving, she ran into Arthur in the lobby. His face, normally a stoic landscape of professional calm, flickered with something she couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Blackwood?" he said, his voice a low rumble. "It's good to see you. You're looking well." "Thank you, Arthur. You too. Everything running smoothly. Like a Swiss watch, as always," he said. Then he paused. It was a fractional hesitation, but Isabella noticed. Although we did have a minor security flag on the 80th floor over the weekend, on Saturday night, Isabella's posture stiffened slightly. The 80th floor was exclusively Damien's. Oh, I didn't realize Damien was working on the weekend. Arthur's gaze was steady, but his eyes were kind. He chose his next words with the care of a man walking through a minefield. It wasn't Mr. Blackwood who triggered the alert, ma'am. The system logged an after-hours entry using a new keycard that was issued last week, a senior-level access card. The alert was automatically cleared when the system cross-referenced the card as authorized by Mr. Blackwood's own master key. Isabella's heart began a slow, heavy drumbeat against her ribs. A new keycard, authorized by Damien, and who was the card issued to, she asked, her voice impressively even. This was the delicate part. Arthur could feign ignorance, cite tenant privacy. But he was looking at Isabella Sterling, not just Isabella Blackwood. He was looking at his true boss. The log shows the card was assigned to a Ms. Chloe Vance, an employee in the marketing department, he said softly. She came in around 9 p.m. on Saturday and left a little after midnight. Chloe Vance. The name was unfamiliar, a blank slate. But the implications were not. A junior employee with a master key to her husband's private floor, entering late on a Saturday night. There was no innocent explanation. The air in the grand, cavernous lobby suddenly felt thin and cold. "I see," Isabella said. The two words were icicles. "Thank you for your diligence, Arthur. It's important to keep track of these irregularities. Please don't mention this to Mr. Blackwood. It's a minor internal matter. I'll handle myself." "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood," Arthur replied, understanding perfectly. This was not a security issue. This was a Sterling issue. As Isabella walked out into the bright city morning, the sun glinting off the brass of the revolving doors, her world had tilted on its axis. The whispers she had been hearing in her own mind now had a name: Chloe Vance. And they had a location, her husband's office. In her building. The audacity of it, the sheer breathtaking arrogance, struck her with the force of a physical blow. She got into the back of her waiting car, her hand instinctively flying to her belly, a fortress protecting her son from a world that had just become treacherous. The quiet, serene Isabella began to recede, and in her place, something else was beginning to form. Something cold, hard, and sharp as sterling steel. For 2 days, Isabella did nothing. She moved through her life like a phantom, her body going through the motions of a billionaire's wife, while her mind worked with a furious, cold clarity. She listened to Damien's excuses about late nights, his hollow endearments, and the lies fell like dead leaves around her. She felt no rage, not yet. The initial shock had been cauterized by a chilling sense of purpose. He had not just brought another woman into their marriage. He had brought her into Isabella's own home, her own legacy. He had used her family's empire as the backdrop for his tawdry affair. This was not merely an infidelity. It was a desecration. On the third night after Damien had fallen asleep, she slipped out of their bed and went into her private study. The room lined with first edition novels and quiet family portraits became her war room. She wasn't just a scorned wife anymore. She was Isabella Sterling, and she was reclaiming her territory. Her first call was not to a divorce lawyer, but to Mr. Harrison, the ancient silver-haired attorney who had managed the Sterling family's legal affairs for half a century. He had bounced her on his knee as a child, and had overseen the transition of the empire to her after her father's passing. "Isabella, my dear." His voice rasped over the secure line full of warmth. "It's past midnight. Is everything all right, the baby?" "The baby is fine, William," she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "I need you to do something for me, and I need absolute discretion. I need the complete file on the lease agreement for the 80th through 85th floors of the Sterling Tower. The tenant is Blackwood Innovations." There was a silence on the other end of the line. William Harrison was sharp enough to read the undertones. "Of course." "Is there a problem with the tenancy? I'm just reviewing some of our legacy holdings," she lied smoothly. "I also need you to access the full employee roster for Blackwood Innovations, specifically the marketing department. I need a photograph and file for an employee named Chloe Vance." Another pause longer this time. "Isabella, if there is something wrong, just the files, William. Email them to my private address. Encrypted, please." An hour later, the files arrived. Isabella opened the lease agreement first. Her eyes scanned the dense legalese until she found what she was looking for. Her father, a shrewd and protective man, had structured the lease with an ironclad morality clause, Section 12, subsection B. It stipulated that any illegal, unethical, or immoral conduct by the tenant's key executives on the premises that could bring the sterling name or property into disrepute was grounds for immediate termination of the lease with a severe financial penalty. Her father had likely intended it to prevent corporate fraud or wild parties. He could never have imagined it would be used against his own son-in-law for infidelity. Next, she opened Chloe Vance's file. The face that stared back from the screen was pretty in a sharp, hungry way. Young, eager. Isabella studied the photo, the calculated ambition in the woman's eyes. She saw everything Damien must have seen, a blank canvas onto which he could project his fantasies of power and desirability. Isabella felt a flicker of something akin to pity for the girl. She was a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing, mistaken for a queen when she was utterly disposable. The final piece of the puzzle came from Arthur. At Isabella's quiet request, he had compiled the security logs, and most damningly the surveillance footage. He delivered a hard drive to her apartment via a trusted courier marked as Nursery Schematics. That night, sitting alone in her study, the city lights twinkling obliviously outside, Isabella watched. She saw her husband, Damien Blackwood, ushering Chloe Vance out of the private elevator. She saw them laughing, his arm draped possessively around her. She watched them kiss silhouetted against the window that overlooked the city, her city. She saw Chloe using her new keycard on a Saturday, wandering through the office as if she owned it, even sitting at Damien's desk, running her hands over his things. Each frame was a fresh stab of betrayal, but tears didn't come. Instead, a glacial calm settled over her. The hurt was there, a deep, aching chasm in her chest, but it was being rapidly filled by a resolve as hard as the bedrock beneath her tower. She saved a few specific clips to a separate folder, time-stamped and documented. The evidence was absolute, irrefutable. She had the lease, the clause, the proof. She had him. She closed the laptop. The image of Damien kissing another woman in the halls of her family's legacy was burned into her mind. He hadn't just broken their vows. He had fundamentally misunderstood who she was. He saw her as a sterling by name, an elegant accessory. He had forgotten that she was a sterling by blood. He had forgotten that the quiet queen in the corner is still a queen, and her castle has eyes and ears. He thought he was on top of the world in his penthouse office, but he had only ever been a guest. And his stay was about to come to a very abrupt end. The next few weeks were a masterclass in silent warfare. Outwardly, Isabella was the picture of serene, expectant motherhood. She discussed birth plans with Damien, feigned interest in his business triumphs, and allowed him to rest a hand on her belly to feel the kick of the son he was so thoroughly betraying. Each touch felt like a lie, each smile a carefully constructed mask. Inside, she was meticulously disassembling his life piece by piece with the precision of a bomb disposal expert. Her first move was with her legal and financial teams. She didn't want just a divorce. She wanted to surgically remove him from her life and her empire, leaving him with nothing but the consequences of his actions. The prenuptial agreement is ironclad, William Harrison assured her during a discreet meeting in his wood-paneled office. His company, Blackwood Innovations, is entirely his. Your assets, sterling properties, and your personal portfolio are entirely yours. The marital assets, the apartment, the art, the cars are to be divided, but that's trivial. It's not his company I'm interested in, William Isabella said, her voice cool. It's his foundation. I want to know how leveraged he is." This sent her financial advisors digging. What they found was illuminating. Damien, in his insatiable quest for growth, had been incredibly aggressive. Blackwood Innovations was a glittering shell, but it was leveraged to the hilt. He had taken out massive loans to fund his expansion into the Asian market, and a significant portion of those loans were secured against the company's perceived stability and prestige. A key part of that prestige, its prime location and long-term lease in the iconic Sterling Tower, a detail his lenders had noted with approval. His position is precarious. One of her analysts, a sharp young woman named Sarah, explained a week later. A sudden public scandal or the loss of his flagship office would trigger covenant breaches in at least 2 of his major loans. His creditors could call in their debts immediately. It would cause a catastrophic loss of confidence. He'd be facing a complete collapse. Isabella absorbed the information without a flicker of emotion. So, if his lease were to be terminated, he'd be ruined, Sarah stated flatly. Her plan began to solidify. This would not be a messy public divorce played out in the tabloids. This would be a corporate execution. Clean, swift, and final. She instructed her team at Sterling Properties to begin drafting the termination notice. They cited Section 12, subsection B, detailing the breach of the morality clause. They attached sworn affidavits from building security personnel and a carefully curated log of Chloe Vance's after-hours access. They did not include the video footage that Isabella was saving for a more personal performance. While her lawyers sharpened their knives, Isabella played her part at home. She feigned fatigue and morning sickness, creating a bubble of domesticity that kept Damien comfortably oblivious. He saw her as a fragile, pregnant woman, entirely consumed by the world of motherhood. It was the perfect cover. "You seem tired, Bella," he said one evening, finding her curled on the sofa, reading a book on infant sleep training. "You should rest. Don't you worry about a thing. I'm out there, building an empire for you and our son." Isabella looked up from her book, a small, gentle smile on her face. "I know you are, darling, and I'm so proud of you." The ease with which the lie came to her lips was terrifying. It felt as if the woman she had been the trusting, loving wife had been put into a deep cryo-sleep, and this new, cold strategist had taken her place. Her final move was to orchestrate the setting. She couldn't just evict him. He had to understand the full scope of his miscalculation. He had to see, in one devastating moment, the power he had so casually disrespected. She had her assistant schedule a meeting, not between their lawyers, but an emergency Q3 tenancy review for Sterling Properties' largest corporate tenants. The meeting was to be held in the main boardroom of Blackwood Innovations, on the 80th floor. Damien's assistant confirmed without a second thought. He would likely see it as a minor annoyance, a routine meeting with his landlord. He would walk into that boardroom expecting to deal with building management. He would find his wife, the Empress, and she would be waiting for him not with tears but with a verdict. For Chloe Vance, the black keycard was a talisman. It lived in a special pocket in her designer handbag, a gift from Damien, and every time her fingers brushed against it, a thrill shot through her. It was her proof. Proof that she was special. Proof that she was winning. She began to use the office with increasing boldness. At first, it was just for late-night trysts with Damien, but soon she started coming up on her own. She would arrive on a Saturday afternoon, letting herself into the silent, empty floor. She'd make herself a drink from Damien's private bar, sit in his enormous leather chair, and prop her feet up on his marble desk, looking down at the city. She was living in a fantasy, a movie of her own making. In this movie, Isabella was a fading, matronly figure, a relic of a past Damien was obligated to. She, Chloe, was the future. She imagined herself redecorating the Fifth Avenue apartment, hosting glamorous parties, and being introduced not as a marketing associate, but as the new Mrs. Blackwood. Damien fueled this delusion, murmuring vague promises about the right time and how things were complicated right now. Her confidence swelled into recklessness. One Friday afternoon, she had a minor spat with her direct supervisor, a man named Mark, over a marketing campaign. Mark was a sycophant to Damien, but a petty tyrant to his subordinates. Feeling belittled and empowered by her secret status, Chloe decided to make a statement. That evening after Mark had left, she used her keycard to enter the executive suite. She went to Mark's much smaller, less impressive office, and in a fit of pique, moved a few items on his desk. She placed one of his prized industry awards slightly askew. She moved his pen holder 2 inches to the left. It was childish, a petty assertion of dominance, but it made her feel powerful. She belonged here. He didn't. She then went to Damien's office, the lingering scent of his expensive cologne a comforting welcome. Lying on his desk was a stack of papers, the quarterly performance reviews he was supposed to sign off on. On top of the pile was Mark's. Chloe picked it up. She read the glowing review Damien had written, filled with corporate praise. A wicked idea sparked in her mind. She found one of Damien's pens, the heavy gold-nibbed fountain pen he favored, and at the bottom of the review, she drew a tiny, almost invisible frowny face. It was an impulsive, foolish act, a secret joke between herself and Damien, or so she thought. She put the paper back on the stack, the tiny act of vandalism, hidden in plain sight. Her delusion reached its apex the following week. Damien was in London for 2 days. He told Chloe to make herself at home if she needed a quiet place to work. Taking him at his word, she invited her one trusted friend, another girl from the city named Jessica, up to the office after work on Tuesday to show it off. "Oh my God, Chloe, this is insane," Jessica said, her jaw slack as she stared out at the glittering skyline. "This is really his office. His and mine," Chloe said with a smug smile, pouring them both champagne from Damien's bar. "He wants me to feel comfortable here. He says this will all be ours one day." They took selfies posing at Damien's desk, lounging on the plush leather sofas. Chloe, emboldened by the champagne and her friend's envious awe, did something she would regret for the rest of her life. She saw a framed photo on a side table. It was of Damien and Isabella on their wedding day, smiling the picture of happiness. A sharp, ugly spike of jealousy pierced Chloe's bubble of fantasy. On impulse, she picked up the frame, opened the back, and slid the photo out. She replaced it with one of the selfies she and Jessica had just taken, the two of them laughing, champagne flutes in hand, with the city lights behind them. She put the wedding photo face down in Damien's desk drawer. "What are you doing?" Jessica asked, her eyes wide. "Just redecorating," Chloe said with a giggle. "It's time for an update." She believed it was a bold declaration of her place in Damien's life, a sign that she was ready to replace the old with the new. She had no idea that she was merely creating evidence. She was a ghost, haunting a house she thought would one day be hers, leaving fingerprints that the true owner was meticulously collecting. Every swipe of the keycard, every glass of champagne, every foolish, arrogant act was another nail in not only Damien's coffin, but her own. The day of the emergency Q3 tenancy review was bright and cold. Damien Blackwood walked into his main boardroom at 10 a.m., feeling irritated. He had a dozen more important things to do than placate his landlord over some trivial building matter. He expected to see a mid-level manager from Sterling Properties, perhaps Arthur from Security. Instead, he saw his wife. Isabella was seated at the head of the long conference table, her usual place when she accompanied him to company events. But she was not in his chair. She was in hers, Today she was not Isabella Blackwood, the supportive wife. She was Isabella Sterling, the owner of the building. She was flanked by William Harrison and another 2 lawyers from the Sterling legal team. Opposite them sat Sarah, her sharp-eyed financial analyst. Arthur Kowalski stood impassively by the door. The air in the room was thick with a silent, lethal tension. Damien stopped dead in the doorway, his practiced smile faltering. "Bella, what is this? I thought I had a meeting with building management." "You do," Isabella said, her voice as cool and clear as the glass walls surrounding them. "Please sit, Damien. We have a lot to discuss." Her use of his full name, devoid of any term of endearment, sent a chill down his spine. He slowly took a seat opposite her, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. "What's going on?" he asked, trying to project an air of command. "If there's an issue, you should have just told me." "This isn't an issue, Damien. It's a termination." Isabella stated, her eyes locked on his. She slid a thick document across the polished table. "This is an official notice. Sterling Properties is terminating the lease for Blackwood Innovations for floors 80 through 85, effective in 30 days. Damien stared at her, then at the document, then back at her. He burst out laughing, a harsh, incredulous sound. "Terminate the lease, Bella. What are you talking about? Are you joking? This is my headquarters. We have a 10-year contract." "You had a 10-year contract," William Harrison interjected, his voice gravelly, "which you have breached, specifically Section 12, subsection B, the morality clause." Damien's face went pale. "The what?" "That's some boilerplate nonsense. What are you alleging?" Isabella didn't answer. Instead, she nodded to Sarah, who tapped a key on a laptop. The large screen at the end of the boardroom, usually reserved for market projections and corporate presentations, flickered to life. It showed security footage, crystal clear, high-definition footage of him and Chloe, kissing by the window, laughing as they entered his private elevator. Then it cut to footage of Chloe, alone, entering on a Saturday night, sitting at his desk, pouring herself a drink. Damien felt the blood drain from his face. He was speechless, his mind scrambling, searching for a denial, an explanation, anything. "The keycard you authorized for your mistress, Miss Chloe Vance Isabella," continued, her voice, a merciless monotone, "has been used to access this floor 27 times after hours in the last 6 weeks. A flagrant and repeated violation of the terms of your lease, which you clearly never bothered to read." "Isabella, listen to me," he stammered, his arrogance crumbling into raw panic. "This is a misunderstanding. She's just an employee, a protégé. I was mentoring her. Mentoring her." Isabella's voice rose for the first time, edged with contempt. She nodded to Sarah again. A new image appeared on the screen, a high-resolution scan of Mark's performance review, with a close-up on the tiny, childish, frowny face drawn at the bottom. "Is this part of your mentorship program, allowing your protégé to vandalize company documents?" Another image flashed on the screen, the selfie of Chloe and her friend Jessica sitting in the picture frame on his side table. "Or perhaps this is," Isabella asked, "replacing a picture of your pregnant wife with a photo of your mistress in a building that my grandfather built, Lerou." The full weight of his catastrophic miscalculation crashed down on Damien. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about where it had happened. The name on the lease he had ignored for years, Sterling Properties, slammed into his consciousness. It hadn't been a coincidence. You own the building." He whispered the words, tasting like ash in his mouth. Isabella leaned forward, her eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen before. "I don't just own the building, Damien. I own this table you're sitting at. I own the air you are breathing. You have been a guest here. And your visit is over." Desperation clawed at him. "Isabella, please," He begged, his voice cracking. The titan of industry was gone, replaced by a pleading, broken man. Think of the baby. Think of our family. We can fix this. I'll fire her. I'll do anything. You mention our son now, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You thought of him when you were giving another woman the key to his father's office, a key to a building that is his birthright. She stood up the picture of cold, regal authority. The termination is final. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Our lawyers will be in touch regarding the divorce. Mr. Harrison will be handling all communication from now on. She turned to Arthur. Arthur, please escort Mr. Blackwood from the boardroom. His access to the building has been revoked. He will be allowed supervised entry to collect his personal effects at a later date. Damien stared in horror as Arthur, a man he had barely noticed for years, stepped forward. His world was collapsing in real time. Isabella, don't do this, he cried out as Arthur put a firm hand on his arm. Isabella didn't look back. She walked towards the door, her posture perfect, her resolve unbreakable. She had walked into the boardroom as a betrayed wife. She was leaving as an empress who had just quelled a rebellion in the most decisive way imaginable, leaving the pretender to the throne to be swept away with the rest of the trash. The news of Damien Blackwood's sudden eviction from the Sterling Tower sent shockwaves through the financial world. The official reason given by Sterling Properties was a material breach of contract, a vague but ominous statement that set tongues wagging. Rumors began to fly, speculating about everything, from financial fraud to mob connections. The truth, when it inevitably leaked, was far more mundane and infinitely more humiliating. Damien's carefully constructed empire crumbled like a sandcastle against the tide. The public loss of his prestigious headquarters was the first domino. As Isabella's analyst had predicted, his creditors, spooked by the instability and the brewing scandal, called in their loans. Blackwood Innovations, leveraged to the breaking point, imploded. The company he had built with such ruthless ambition was dismantled and sold for parts to cover his debts. He went from the cover of Forbes to a cautionary tale in the business section in less than a month. He tried to fight the divorce, but the evidence Isabella had compiled was overwhelming. The prenup held firm. He was left with a fraction of his former wealth, his reputation in tatters. The king was exiled, stripped of his kingdom, his queen and his heir. And Chloe. She was the first piece of collateral damage. She was fired the same day as the boardroom confrontation, her corporate email and access card deactivated mid-keystroke. She found out when she was unceremoniously stopped at the lobby security desk, the keycard that had been her talisman, now just a useless piece of plastic. Damien, consumed by his own spectacular downfall, never even called her. She had been a means to an end, a distraction, and when the fantasy shattered, she was discarded amidst the wreckage. She vanished from the city, another ambitious girl, chewed up and spit out by a world she tried to conquer. 3 months later, Isabella gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Nathaniel Sterling. She did not give him the Blackwood name. He was a Sterling through and through, heir to an empire built on steel, concrete, and resilience. One crisp autumn afternoon, Isabella stood in what had once been Damien's office. The space had been completely gutted, stripped bare to the concrete and glass. The marble desk, the leather sofas, every remnant of his existence was gone. Workmen were quietly taking measurements for a new interior. It was being converted into a non-profit incubator space funded by the Sterling Foundation to support women-led startups. Holding her son, who was swaddled warmly in her arms, Isabella looked out the window at the same view Damien had once coveted. The city spread before her, not as a collection of assets to be conquered, but as a legacy to be nurtured. The betrayal had wounded her, yes. It had carved a hole in her heart. But it had also awakened a strength she never knew she possessed. She had been forced to shed the role of the quiet, supportive wife and step into her true power as the head of her family's dynasty. Damien had given his mistress the key to his office, thinking he was offering her the world. In the end, he had only given her a front-row seat to his own destruction, while simultaneously handing Isabella the very key she needed to lock him out of her life forever. He had built a gilded cage for himself, and she, the unsuspecting owner, had finally decisively slammed the door. As Nathaniel cooed softly in her arms, Isabella Sterling smiled. The storm was over. It was time to rebuild. 5 years is a lifetime. For some, it is a period of quiet erosion. For others, a renaissance. In a sun-drenched corner of Central Park, a young boy with his mother's calm eyes and a shock of dark hair laughed as he chased a soccer ball. At 5 years old, Nathaniel Sterling was the undisputed center of Isabella's universe. She watched him from a park bench, the crisp autumn air carrying the sound of his joy. At 40, Isabella wore her power, not like a suit of armor, but like a perfectly tailored coat with effortless grace. She was no longer just the heiress. She was the architect. Under her leadership, Sterling Properties had ventured into sustainable development and philanthropic projects that had reshaped parts of the city's character. She was known as a formidable visionary CEO, respected for her sharp intellect and unwavering ethics. The scandal that had shattered her marriage was now a footnote in a biography of triumph. She had found a new kind of love, not in another man, but in the life she was building. Her heart was full, occupied by her son, her work, and a profound sense of peace. The ghost of Damien Blackwood no longer haunted the halls of her memory. Miles away, in a nondescript office building in Queens, Damien Blackwood stared at a spreadsheet, the numbers blurring under the flickering fluorescent lights. At 43, he looked 10 years older. The sharp, predatory charisma had been replaced by a weary resignation. After the collapse of his company and the brutal divorce, he had been rendered a pariah in the world he once dominated. No one would back him. No one would hire him for an executive role. He was now a regional sales manager for a mid-level software company managing a team of 12. He drove a modest sedan and lived in a rented 2-bedroom apartment. The fall had been absolute. The most exquisite torture was the city itself. Every so often he would see her face on the cover of a magazine in a newsstand or on a tablet screen in a coffee shop. Isabella Sterling, remaking a metropolis. He would read about the Isabella Sterling Center for Women Entrepreneurs, a thriving hub of innovation located on the 80th floor of the Sterling Tower. The irony was a physical pain, a constant reminder that the space where he had planned his ascent was now dedicated to undoing the very culture of male arrogance he had embodied. He had not only lost his empire, he had become a ghost in hers. Chloe Vance learned her lesson, but not the one she should have. She was now a personal assistant to a real estate developer in Chicago. She was more cautious, more subtle in her ambitions. She no longer believed in grand romantic gestures like the offering of a key. Instead, she focused on pragmatism, securing a generous salary and a nice apartment. She was still beautiful, still hungry, but the wide-eyed sparkle was gone, replaced by a harder, more cynical sheen. She was perpetually chasing a lifestyle forever, on the outside of the glass, looking in at a world she felt she deserved, but could never quite grasp. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Isabella ducked into a small cafe in the West Village to wait for her driver. As she stood by the counter ordering a tea, the door opened, and a man hurried in, shaking the rain from his worn trench coat. He turned, and their eyes met across the room. It was Damien. The shock was a jolt, an echo of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. He looked smaller, diminished. The air of invincibility he used to wear was gone, leaving behind an ordinary tired man. He stared at her, his face a canvas of shock, shame, and a deep, aching regret. He took a hesitant step toward her. "Isabella," he said, his voice raspy, unfamiliar. Isabella simply looked at him. There was no anger, no hatred. There was nothing. He was a stranger she used to know. "Damien," she replied, her tone polite, neutral, the kind one uses for a distant acquaintance. I always wanted to say." He began, fumbling for words that had been lost for 5 years. "I was a fool, I'm sorry. For everything." His apology, once the only thing she had craved, now felt irrelevant, like a letter delivered to an old address. "I know," she said softly. It was not an absolution, but a statement of fact. She gave him a small, final nod. "I have to go. My son is waiting." With that, she turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving him standing in the middle of the room. He watched through the rain-streaked window as a sleek black car pulled up, and she got in, disappearing back into the city that was hers. He hadn't just lost a fortune and a wife. He had lost the chance to know his own son. That was the one consequence, the one true and final price of his betrayal that would follow him for the rest of his life. As the car moved smoothly through the city streets, Isabella checked her phone. A picture of Nathaniel from his first day of school was her wallpaper. She smiled. Damien thought his kingdom was a penthouse office. He had been so wrong. Her empire, her real, unconquerable empire, was right here. It was the future, and it was just beginning. In the end, this wasn't just a story of infidelity. It was a story about power, the power we think we have, and the power that lies dormant, waiting for its moment. Damien Blackwood believed his power came from his money and his name on the door. He was wrong. True power, the kind that endures, is in the foundation, in the legacy, in the quiet strength of those who are underestimated. Isabella Sterling didn't need to scream or cry to win her war. She used intelligence, patience, and the unshakable power of ownership to reclaim her life and protect her child's future. What do you think was Isabella's response justified, or was it a cold-hearted corporate execution? Could Damien have ever been redeemed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of betrayal and ultimate triumph resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a story of sweet revenge, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for listening.